In modern India, there's this really fascinating and honestly critical paradox that's playing out all around us. It affects pretty much every part of our public life. So today, we're going to dive deep into the state of civic behavior. We'll look at some seriously compelling data and try to figure out why what we believe and what we actually do, well, why they're often two completely different things.
And to really get why this matters so much, we have to start right here. Because look, this isn't just about messy streets or a bit of inconvenience. This is literally a life or death issue. Think about this. On India's roads, one person dies every 3 minutes. Just let that sink in. That single, stark fact really sets the stage for why we're not just talking about a social problem, but a full-blown, urgent crisis.
Right, and this quote from sociologist Deepankar Gupta, man, it just hits the nail on the head. It gets right to the heart of this whole puzzle. He's basically saying the problem isn't that people are ignorant. People know the right thing to do. So the real question, the one we need to answer, is why on earth don't they do it?
Okay, so to get to the bottom of this, we're going to dig into the findings from a huge nationwide survey. It's all about what they call gross domestic behavior. You can think of this as the data that finally pulls back the curtain on this massive national contradiction.
So the survey's biggest takeaway, its central finding, is this thing we can call the knowledge-action gap. And it's exactly what it sounds like. This massive disconnect between what people say they believe is the right way to act in public and what they actually, do day in and day out.
And wow, this slide right here puts some hard numbers to that gap. I mean, just look at this. A massive 85% of people say, yeah, evading transport fares is wrong. But Indian Railways caught 3.6 crore, that's 36 million people doing exactly that in just 1 year. Or how about this? Most of us agree paying bribes is wrong. Yet 61% admit they'd be willing to pay one just to get things done faster. See? This isn't just a small difference of opinion, it's a giant chasm, and it's laid out right here in black and white.
Okay, so we've seen the numbers, but what does this gap actually look like out there, in the real world? Let's take a look at how this paradox creates actual chaos in our shared public spaces. And we'll start with the most dangerous one of all, our roads.
Whoa. This chart really puts things into a stark, global perspective. India's road death rate isn't just high, it is on a whole other level compared to other major countries. We're talking 250 deaths for every 10,000 kilometers of road. That is more than double China's rate, and an absolutely staggering 4 times higher than the USA. You have to remember, these aren't just numbers on a chart. They represent a fundamental and tragic breakdown in public safety.
And what's really scary is that within this crisis, some of the most preventable problems are actually getting worse. Let's talk about drunk driving. The data here shows a clear upward trend, year after year, in both accidents and heartbreaking deaths. And if you look at the projections, this incredibly dangerous behavior is just set to keep climbing. This is happening despite all the laws, all the awareness campaigns. It's the knowledge-action gap, and its consequences are fatal.
All right, and this total disregard for shared space that we see on our roads, well, it's pretty much mirrored by another gigantic challenge: waste. Get a load of this number, 26,000 tons. That's how much plastic waste is generated in India every single day. It's a number that's almost hard to wrap your head around. The sheer scale of it is staggering, and it's another daily symptom of that same civic paradox.
But the most shocking part isn't even the amount of trash. It's where it all ends up. A mind-boggling 80% of all this trash never even makes it to a proper landfill. So where does it go? Well, it ends up on our streets, it clogs our drains, and it pollutes our rivers and lakes. This is the direct environmental fallout from a collective failure in civic responsibility.
So we've seen the devastating what of the problem. Now we've got to ask the most important question of all: why? Right? Why does this huge gap between knowing and doing exist on such a massive scale? Let's try and unpack some of the root causes.
Okay, so one of the best ways to understand this behavior is through a concept called the tragedy of the commons. It's a classic theory, and it basically describes a situation where a group of people all share a resource. Now, if every single person acts only in their own immediate self-interest, like, say, throwing just one piece of trash on the street because it's convenient, the collective result is that the resource gets ruined for everyone. And in our case, our public spaces, they are that shared resource.
And you know what? We see this tragedy of the commons play out every single day. There's this sharp, almost invisible line we draw between my space and public space. Our homes, our cars, we keep those spotless, right? But the street right outside, or the train we ride in, suddenly that's someone else's problem. someone else's responsibility to clean. And that's the mindset that leads to things like tossing garbage right out of a perfectly clean car. You're sacrificing the collective good for your own personal convenience.
And look, it's not just one single thing causing this. It's more like a cocktail of factors that all feed into each other. You've got the broken windows theory, which says that when a place already looks neglected, with litter and graffiti, it basically sends a signal that nobody cares, which just invites more bad behavior. Then you add in inconsistent enforcement. We have the rules, but if they're rarely applied, people just learn to ignore them. And over time, this bad behavior becomes so common, it gets normalized. You start thinking, well, everyone else is doing it, so why shouldn't I? And all of this is built on a foundation where that kind of structured, practical civic education is often just missing when we're growing up.
Okay, I know what you're thinking. Looking at all this, it's really easy to feel a bit down, a bit pessimistic. But this is where the story takes a fascinating and, believe it or not, a genuinely hopeful turn. Because here's the thing, this problem is not unsolvable. In fact, we have proven blueprints for large-scale transformation, and they're right here in India.
And if you want proof, you just have to look at one city, Indore. Back in 2014, it was ranked a pretty dismal 149th in cleanliness. Fast forward to today, and it's been named India's cleanest city for 8 years in a row. 8! This isn't just a small improvement. This is a complete systemic turnaround, and it proves that dramatic change is absolutely 100% possible. So, the big question is, how on earth did they pull it off? Well, it wasn't one single silver bullet. It was a comprehensive, interlocking system. It started with making waste segregation at home mandatory, which made every single citizen part of the solution from day one. They used smart tech, like GPS-tracked vehicles, to make the whole collection process super efficient and accountable. But, and this is so crucial, they launched these massive campaigns that got the entire community involved. It created a real sense of shared purpose and pride. And of course, all of this was backed by a solid political commitment and the money needed for infrastructure. It's a model that didn't just clean the streets, it fundamentally changed how citizens related to their own public space.
And if we look abroad for a second, the Japanese model really hammers home a key part of Indore's success, the power of starting young. In Japan, school kids clean their own classrooms every single day. By doing that, they learn a fundamental lesson. This shared space belongs to us. It's not just about knowing it's good to be clean, it's about making cleanliness a daily personal habit. This is how you bridge that knowledge-action gap from the very beginning. You build a sense of ownership that can last a lifetime.
All right, so this brings us to the final and maybe the most crucial point of all. We've seen the problem, right? We've unpacked the reasons behind it, and we've even looked at proven solutions. So what it all really boils down to is a collective choice.
And this right here is the ultimate takeaway. Remember that quote from the very beginning? People already know what's right. The problem is an awareness. We don't need more campaigns telling us not to litter. The real solution isn't changing behavior by building better systems. Systems with consistent enforcement, practical education, and great public infrastructure. We need to make it easier to do the right thing, and frankly, a lot harder to do the wrong one.
So let's end on this final thought. The incredible story of Indore proves that improvement on a massive scale is possible. The tools are there, the knowledge is there, the only thing left in the equation is our collective will. So the question really isn't whether India can improve anymore. The question is, will Indians choose to? Will we choose to finally close that gap between knowing what's right and actually doing it? Every single one of us, every single day.